On everybody, welcome into the Friday morning edition of the Daily Dime here at FTNFantasy.com. Zac Graham, aka Weisenberg DFS, joined once again by my co-host Alex Blickle. Alex, it's Friday, coming off a pretty good night of NBA action. A little Thursday night football in there as well. How you feeling on this Friday morning?
Yeah, feeling good. We've got some momentum here in these NBA streets. We got the pick six win 2 nights ago, and then a couple wins last night. We had the really quick and easy first quarter underdog win. I know you hit some prize pick stuff as well. So yeah, we're kind of rolling, and hopefully we can continue that momentum tonight.
Yeah, man, the prize picks felt a little dirty. Like, I'll take the three for three over there, but like when I saw Jonas Valanciunas not starting, I was like, oh man, like we're cooked. He ends up getting there anyway, so we'll take what we can get. A 3 out of 3 on underdog, 3 out of 3 on prize picks last night. So let's keep it going. And again, we're back into the double digits in terms of the number of games here tonight. So we'll talk some more props. We'll talk a little pick six, DFS, of course, looking at this slate. I know you got to go here in about 10 minutes. So I want to toss it to you first. Let's talk some props. Did us pretty well, kind of shotgun starting it into the props yesterday. What are you looking at here this morning?
The one that I like the most, I wish it was available everywhere. Hopefully it gets added on prize picks and underdog, but over on pick six, you can get Amin Thompson over 1.5 blocks plus steals. That is such a good number. I mean, this is a guy who he is a stocks machine, just like his brother Oscar. And Memphis was dead last in the league last year. They allowed the most opponent blocks per game. They're also bottom 10 in the league in opponent steals per game allowed. So it's just a perfect matchup. We know he's going to play probably I think he played 22 minutes in game one. If he plays anywhere close to 20, he should cover this no problem. And honestly, this is one where I wish that you could go ladder blocks and steals on sportsbooks or something, because I would play it all the way up to 5.5 or something like that with some big odds. I really like his defensive upside in this matchup.
Yeah, I agree. Actually had an Amin Thompson prep that I'm going to talk about on prize picks too. And somebody that I talked about a good bit in the preseason where Thompson is the sixth man now for this team. And it only takes one little lineup adjustment that Coach Udoka makes in the middle of the game, one little ankle tweak here or there throughout the season for Thompson to slot into this starting lineup. And with his positional versatility, I just think this is going to be a big leap for Thompson this year. I'm with you on the stocks pick there. And I'll just give this one out because I like it everywhere. I'm going back to Josh Giddey. I know he didn't quite get on top of that 24.5 PRA on Wednesday's slate, and it's up at 25.5 here today, but I am less than scared of the Milwaukee Bucks defense here this year still. And Chicago going to Milwaukee here tonight. It wasn't a lack of minutes in terms of an issue for Josh Giddey. I think a little bit more respect maybe needs to be given to the Pels there, and just a tough start there for the Bulls. They did not look great as a team, but I'm going right back to Giddey tonight because my thoughts on his increased role here with the Bulls, and again, the minutes got to 30 there against the Pelicans, and that's really what I'm looking for this prop. I'm still standing on the idea that this line is going to settle around 27, 28.5 over the first couple weeks of the season. So Josh Giddey is my first pick there that I'm going to throw into this pick six entry as well.
Yeah, I like that one. I'm definitely with you on where he lands long term. I think the only question that I have with him is, does it take a little bit for him to kind of feel like he can play the type of role that he's going to eventually play, or does he feel like he has to kind of ease himself in with these new teammates?
I think that's a fair question. I think what I want to point out tonight, and why I'm still so confident in going back to it here, is no Lonzo Ball tonight. He's going to sit out here the second game of the season. So again, there are still plenty of guards in this backcourt, right? It does help the minutes floor of Kobe White. I would assume who's going to get a little bit more time. Maybe Zach LaVine slides down, plays some more too rather than the three. But again, I'm sticking with Giddey here, and maybe I'll be proven wrong, but I ain't giving up after one game.
Well, I would even say just because he didn't produce in game one, he was pretty close to as involved as we want him to be. So yeah, even though he didn't get there in game one, there were encouraging signs about it. So I do really like this one. The next place I'm going to go, I'm actually going to throw up the tool on this one.
Oh yeah,
because this is really strong. So when we look at the 3-pointers made tab, we got Desmond Bane only projected for 2.74. His line is 3.5. And the reason why I like this so much is at 69% in the tool. But the reason why I like this so much is because Houston really made it a priority last year to take away the three. And there's also going to be some really nice correlation here, which we can't totally see because we don't have steals plus blocks listed. But if you go to, let's go to steals, for example, and we find, I think it was Van Vliet here. Okay, never mind. It might have been Amin Thompson over blocks or something, but essentially, I know that there's going to be correlation here because if they are running guys off of the 3-point line, as they like to do last year, that means guys are getting into the lane. That's when steals and blocks happen, right? If the offense is able to just sit back, shoot threes all they want like Boston does, well, guess what? You get fewer stocks opportunities. So I like the Bane under on his threes, especially as it correlates with this Amin Thompson over that we like so much.
I like that call, man. And again, you can come over to ftnfantasy.com. You sign up with us. You got the Pick 6 tool, which is new. We've got our Prize Picks prop tool as well. And of course, those continue to be updated throughout the day as they add more props to the board on both sides of that, right? Underdog Prize Picks as well. So I know, right, we had Brett in here talking about we need another first quarter prop bet. So I actually do have a couple picks. I know you and I have been going back and forth on some of these this morning. So this is what I had on Underdog last night. The first one I wanted to talk about is McCall Bridges. And the more than selection are higher over there on Underdog, right, than 4.5 points in the first quarter. I know, right, much has been made about the little hitch that we've seen in his shot over the last month. He wasn't bad in that second half after a pretty disastrous start for him.
He didn't have the hitch.
I know. I don't know. What is going on here?
It was the strangest thing. Yeah. He was also shooting from like over here, but whatever.
I know. But what to me is most important about this line is that McCall Bridges played the entire first quarter. And certainly that's not something that's new for him. But you always have a little bit of a question when guys change teams. Is the coach going to maybe shift how you've approached them in the past? We probably should have known since it's Coach Tibbs there that McCall Bridges is going to play the whole first quarter. But I love the higher than 4.5 points for him in this first quarter. Going up against the Pacers tonight, this game's going to get up and down, especially relative to what you expect out of New York on a nightly basis.
Yeah, 100%. And actually, you could also, if you're saying, you know what, I want to be with you on this. I know that he's now going to play 12 minutes in the first quarter, so I want to be with you on this, but I struggle to go to his points because of the shooting.
Sure.
His higher than 1.5 first quarter rebounds is at 1.16x. So I like that quite a bit too.
Absolutely. Especially right with like Towns, not the most dominant guy on the boards. You still expect him to average double digits in terms of rebounds this season. But I like that call as well. And I think especially because didn't we refresh the board right before we went? And this Bridges points prop is now at 0.94x, I think. So I think now, right, that was a line that I was on last night. I think I would shift with you now and take that rebounds line too. But let's talk Philly here, right? We're still not going to get Embiid over the weekend. Paul George still out tonight. Another guy on that team, on your favorite team, plays a lot in the first quarter. Are we both on Tyrese Maxey here?
Yeah, we are. Higher than 7.5 first quarter points. I mean, look, he was shooting so much in the first quarter. Getting to the basket. He was also, if you remember, like last year, he was one of the most automatic first quarter guys. It's not just that he plays so much in the first quarter. It's that he comes out with just so much aggression. And I think there's also something to be said about like, it takes a little bit for defenses to go, oh shit, he's that fast, right? Like they have to actually adjust to his speed. And so in the first quarter, he tends to get a lot of easy looks. And yeah, he can run into a really bad shooting night like he did against Milwaukee and not get there in the first quarter. But man, if he's even like almost at his averages shooting percentage wise, he's going to get there.
Yeah. Anything else you like here on the Underdog side? Maybe any prize picks, any other props that you wanted to touch on?
Yeah, I've got a couple that I want to ask you about because this Orlando defense strikes me as one of the better defenses in the league, particularly good at potentially taking away 3-point shots. The tool has some strong unders on Cam Johnson threes, Dorian Finney-Smith threes, Cam Johnson points, and Cam Thomas points. Any of those four strike you as really solid? Because I could be talked into any of them.
I think the Cam Thomas one is pretty interesting, and it always feels bad to take an under position on Cam Thomas when we're talking about points or field goal attempts or what have you. But I mean, and again, we don't want to react. Everybody, most teams have only played 1 of 82 so far, but the Magic looked as advertised, man. When you send Jimmy Butler off at the end of the night, 1 for 8, just 3 points, minus 30, this Orlando Magic defense has carried over, unsurprisingly, year to year. I think they're a little bit better with Kentavious Caldwell-Pope in there now, taking a lot of that Gary Harris time. Still got Gary Harris in the fold, right? I think it's a tough matchup for Cam. The shots are going to go up, but I think I like the under. I think that would be my pick out of those. Again, as much as it makes me nervous to go against Cam Thomas when it's talking about scoring the ball, I think this is a spot where I would follow the model and what it's seeing.
Yeah, there's also the chance that this is just a blowout and he ends up sitting the fourth quarter, which would help it a lot. But I think this is also one that I'm going to be more likely to play on pick 6 than underdog, just because this seems like the sweet spot of the type of pick that people are going to take overs on, right? Like if you remember last year, he came out early in the season, 30-point game, 30-point game, 30-point game. If you click his, most recent game log from last year, 30-point game, 30-point game, 30-point game, and now starts this year with another good one. So this just seems like a popular pick. And so if I can grab some leverage with it as well, I think it's probably good everywhere, but it's especially good on pick 6 for that reason.
Yeah, I like that too. Like bringing back around what you went through Wednesday, right? We talked about to start the stream yesterday, or when we were talking pick 6, about how everybody is taking those studs, especially on a big slate like this, right? You're not too concerned with the ownership on those picks in pick 6 with 10 games. So I like the call. Talking more, and again, I love the Prize Picks fantasy score props. Shout out to Prize Picks for getting those up nice and early here this morning. I've got a nice little 6-pack here, and I do have kind of some confidence intervals. I would say John Morant, more than 39.5 fantasy score on the surface is like, what is going on here? But you look at the rotations that Coach Jenkins ran out on Wednesday night, and they were extremely flat. I don't think we got more than 24, 25 minutes from any of those starters, right? And so that's something to keep an eye on, even if you're getting mid-20s in minutes from Ja, which I expect those to start trickling up by tonight. Yep. Sub 40 for his fantasy score prop. I took a more than stance here early in the morning. Again, I understand the risks involved with that, but you give me 39.5 fantasy score on John Morant, no publicly available restrictions that I can find, right? It's not like Coach came out and said he's limited to sub 30. I like that one a lot, but I think it's probably the riskiest out of these 6 that I have. We talked about Amin Thompson and his stocks. I think the more than on 21.5 fantasy points is pretty nice. This is a guy who can fill up the box score. And, right, you were already talking stocks. We get 3 fantasy points for stocks here on Prize Picks. So I like the Amin Thompson more than as well. Before I kind of run through the rest of these, was there anything else that you wanted to point out on the prop side? Or if not, I can let you go ahead and get out of here. I know you got places to be.
Yeah, I think that's probably it. I'm looking through some of the steals and blocks over on pick 6, and they actually just locked a bunch of them. So if you're thinking that you're going to wait to the end of this stream to kind of put some picks in, I would recommend while you listen, jump on pick 6. Make sure you use promo code FTN if you're signing up for the first time. It looks like some of these might disappear soon, and I definitely want to get in before that Amin Thompson locks.
Absolutely. And we had Tyreek in the chat in our FTN Fantasy Discord saying, can we throw a recap of our prop picks into the Discord if we have time? He's in public, can't listen to the stream at full volume right now, so we'll absolutely do that and try to get a recap of those picks into the Discord every single day. Because, like yesterday, if you all had those picks and made them, we were all looking at green screens last night. So anything else for you, Alex, before you get out of here?
That'll do it.
All right, Alex. Appreciate it. Have a good weekend, man. We'll be back on Monday.
Back at you. Let's get some big football winners as well this weekend. So
absolutely, NFL show Sunday morning. Alex and Two Gun. Make sure you tune in.
All right, boys. Have a good one.
All right, see you, Alex. All right, everybody. Let's real quick. We can talk through a couple of those picks that I didn't get to yet on Prize Picks, and then we'll sweep through the DFS slate for the morning. Again, 10 games here on the Daily Dime, so we're not going to go team by team or game by game, but highlight some of the guys that are standing out, maybe guys that are too low owned, maybe too high owned here in the morning runs. But finishing up with some of those prize picks fantasy score props, I'm going right back to Andre Drummond tonight. 35.5, a more than selection on his 35.5 fantasy score. Again, these are, once we get more into the middle of the season, you'll still see some less than picks from me early in the season. But once things normalize, that's when you start to go more to that. Eyeballing this board, Andre Drummond, more than 35.5 fantasy score, was on pace for about 30 minutes before the blowout the other night. And his fantasy rates just should have his projection well north of that if we're looking at around 30 minutes for Drummond. And then going back to two Grizzlies props in this 6-pick entry that I fired in this morning. Brandon Clark, I know he let us down big time on the DFS side the other night as one of the few usable values on that DraftKings slate. But they've got a fantasy score prop up for him this morning set at 15.5. And Brandon Clark is a guy that should be over a fantasy point per minute type of player. You would expect him to get into the mid-teens in minutes here tonight. So I like Clark as well. And then closing it out, we talked about Giddey PRA, where you can get him fantasy score at 30.5. I actually like that better than the PRA. So if that pops on Underdog this afternoon, I would prefer that fantasy score prop at that line. So on prize picks, we've got that in there. And then rounding it out, KD over or more than, over there on prize picks, more than 39.5 fantasy score. So fire any questions. I see Shazam in here as we transition to DraftKings. Shazam's in the chat saying Drummond's price much more reasonable on FanDuel today than it was on Wednesday. And I agree. And not like they had the toughest matchup in the world on Wednesday, but they get the Raptors north of the border here tonight, and Sixers, no Embiid, no Paul George, are still 5-point road favorites here. On the Raptors side, no Quickly, no RJ Barrett. I believe both those guys doubtful, so not expected to play. And again, KD, more than 39.5 fantasy score. Suns, actually 1.5-point road dogs here. Lakers and Suns, one of the late night hammers tonight, 226 implied total. I like the more than there on KD. Shifting gears here to close out the dime on a Friday with some DFS talk. Let's see. Let me pull up, get off our pick six tool here. We'll pull up what we've got going in the Opto in our ownership projections here. And I will note there's a couple guys, again, like I did the last 2 days for our FTN fantasy subscribers. I'm going to be in there shortly, editing a couple minutes, a couple rates that I think are a little bit off here as we dial in over the first week of the season. But from what we've got now in my first looks at the slate last night, talking about DraftKings specifically, I think this is a game where you can look to Orlando. We were pretty much off of that Orlando-Miami matchup on Wednesday. Now the Magic are hosting the Nets. Still a low implied total relative to the slate, just 215. I believe that is the lowest total on the slate still by about 3 points. Blazers-Pelicans looks a little nasty at the end of the night, but I think Paolo at 8,700 on DraftKings looks like a pretty darn strong spend up. We talked about, especially on the fast break with Mike Randall in the preseason, talked about how both of us were extremely high on the Magic, and not that was any sort of hot take or unique perspective on this young up-and-coming team in Orlando. I think Paolo ripe to take another jump here in his young career. So at 8,700, he looks interesting to me. So does Zion Williamson, though, and kind of talking about some of these forwards in games with less than ideal implied totals, but Zion expected to be back tonight. He's power forward center on DraftKings, and 8,100. I'm feeling a lot better about going to that 8K range here today compared to Wednesday's slate, where we were really scraping the bottom of the barrel for value. Speaking of value, I think one guy that stands out to the field after his big opening night is going to be Dyson Daniels. He's still 4,600 here on DraftKings. I want to keep an eye on his ownership because the field could certainly overreact and overown a guy like Dyson Daniels. We should not count on 6 stocks on a nightly basis from a guy like that. But with Bogdan Bogdanovic out, DeJounte Murray obviously out of town, came back in that trade for Daniels. Sub 5K he looks like a pretty strong value here, as does somebody that we mentioned on the dime on Wednesday. He was in my placeholder, didn't play him by the time we got to lock, and then all of a sudden, Caleb Martin getting the start for Josh Green. So I think you can go back to a guy like Caleb Martin here for the Hornets. He's guard forward eligible, which certainly helps. DraftKings logging me out here. That's always fun. So we'll get back to my placeholder here. Cody sitting now 3,700, so $600 price increase. But not only was Josh Green out on Wednesday, Brandon Miller got injured, and he is out tonight as well. 32 minutes, or not 32 minutes, excuse me. Let me pull up the box score. Again, sub 4K for Caleb Martin. He's not an outstanding fantasy producer, but again, looking for these guys at sub 4K who have 30-minute upside. You got 24 minutes out of Caleb, or Cody, rather. Caleb in Philadelphia. Caleb himself, an interesting play tonight, about $1,000 more expensive than his brother there in Charlotte. But I think with these shorthanded Sixers as well, Caleb Martin, who's listed probable, he's another value option at 4,900. So flipping through the rest of some of this ownership, keep an eye on Brooklyn, right? It's tough to get there, really with anybody, and probably looking at Brooklyn, I'd say Cam Johnson is probably the guy that looks the best to me. 5,600 should play 30-plus minutes, but far from a priority. I think what the field is going to do, and the ownership is showing this right now, that Ben Simmons is a guy that the field might go to from this Brooklyn team. You've got Nick Claxton back on that minutes restriction, and Ben Simmons playing some of the 5. Didn't look awful the other night. And again, we're worried about him stuffing the stat sheet, and he still was on pace for that in their opener. But double-digit dogs here, and Simmons picking up some ownership. I don't think I can really target that too heavily. P-Buck in here saying, loading up on Atlanta-Charlotte game. Atlanta and Charlotte looks pretty darn good, right? Implied total like 226, I want to say. Yeah, exactly, 226. There's a good memory for once. Right, you're going to get ownership. We talked about Dyson Daniels. LaMelo on the other side, 9,300, I think still an extremely strong play, especially with the usage of a guy like Brandon Miller out of there. You can consider a Miles Bridges, right? But I think after LaMelo, it's more Cody Martin, who we talked about. Trey Mann played a lot after the Miller injury off the bench, playing next to LaMelo for a good bit. 4,300, he's usable. And then on the Atlanta side, right, talked about Daniels, but Trey at 9,700. I think he's lower owned, I think, by the time we get to lock than LaMelo. So that's an interesting pivot. You can totally stack that game up. You can go a little bit cheaper if you're spending up on the Atlanta side, 7.7 for Jalen Johnson. That's a good call there, P-Buck. I think that's obviously one of the more attractive fantasy environments on the night. So is the Warriors and the Jazz. Warriors side, though, a little bit tough to get to, considering Coach Kerr played 12 guys in the opener and said post-game that's probably going to continue for the foreseeable future. But you look at that Utah Jazz side, Lauri Markkanen, big game on Wednesday against Memphis. I think you can go back there. You can go to a Walker Kessler. So at home, 3.5-point dogs are the Jazz, but the highest implied total on the slate. Definitely want to be looking to some Jazz options in my MME build. No absolute priorities there for any single entry players. And then P-Buck also brings up Scotty Barnes night, and that is kind of the one stud that I really wanted to highlight here from a DFS perspective. Because again, Toronto taking on Philly, much better matchup. Evan Mobley just kind of eliminating Scotty Barnes the other night from the box score. But looking at this team, right, Scotty Barnes, 8,800 now. Throw him into that 8K range I was talking about with Paolo, with Zion. Scotty's my favorite of that group, and Zion's probably second, but I want to have shares of all of those guys. We still have no Kelly O. We've got doubtful IQ. We've got doubtful Barrett. Still no Bruce Brown here. So I think Chris Boucher, 3,900 on DraftKings, is in play again. He lost his center eligibility. Not that we really wanted to play in that center in the first place, but Boucher is a usable value play, especially in large field tournaments. I think Jakob Poeltl going out there against Andre Drummond is a secondary option in that 6K range. Grady Dick is a minutes play, not one that I'm super thrilled to get to with any sort of volume, but guard forward eligible 5K. I think he's picking up some ownership here early in the day. We can take a look as well at, let me check out the chat, take a look at the FanDuel side. Get a refresh there. Let's see. Kroger's in the chat says, WTF, 3 of your picks are no longer available on pick 6. All the NBA picks are locked. Don't know what they're doing, but everything is locked. Where do you see ownership? Oh, no, cards. I'm guessing on ownership here because our ownership isn't uploaded yet. That's coming after the stream. Shazam hasn't looked at DK yet. FanDuel pricing was pretty reactive, right? Yeah, and you mentioned Drummond over there. All right, so let's get to FanDuel Philly. Drummond 6,900. It's very nice. Yeah, looks a lot better. That entire team over there, right? I think you can go back to Kelly Oubre, who was a strong play prior to Wednesday's slate, guard forward eligible. His price came down a little bit. Caleb Martin, 53. Tyrese Maxey, 9,400. In one lineup, probably not for me. I'd rather get to Drummond at 6,900, but center only. So you're, again, 10-game slate, you're going to have to make some executive decisions at that center position. Other guys I had, let me pull my placeholder. I had Oubre in there. I mean, it's a lot of Josh Giddey mentions for one stream, but 6,100, that's a lock for me in my one FanDuel lineup. I think Ben Simmons, once again, is going to pick up some interest. Guard forward, he's sub 6K there. Again, starting at center for the Nets. I know the game environment doesn't look great, but I think people are going to take a shot there, and I wouldn't be surprised if I do as well on FanDuel. And then talking some of the spend ups, right? I think kind of like P-Buck talked about, LaMelo and Trey at the top of guard look pretty good. I had LaMelo in there. He's 10-1 though. So at that point, would you rather just go ahead and spend up on a Giannis at 11-4, Anthony Davis 11K at center? I'd probably still prefer LaMelo. But to Shazam's point in the FTN Discord, right? The reactive pricing wasn't just guys declining in price. It's also the price increases on guys like LaMelo, who's all of a sudden over 10K. One of 3 players on this slate, I believe, priced in the 5-figure range over there on FanDuel. I think that right now I'm between at center, kind of the last thing before we have any other questions come in and shut the stream down here for the morning. The biggest dilemma I had when I was making a placeholder last night was between Andre Drummond, again, who we noted down under, he's sub 7K now, and Karl Anthony Towns, who's still sub 8K there. Both of those guys center only. Towns gets the matchup against the Pacers. I did have Towns in that placeholder, but that's going to be a debate in my head throughout the afternoon. Which center do I go with between Towns and Drummond? Those are probably my 2 favorite center options. Şengün looked fantastic, kind of a mini Jokic the other night against the Hornets. A little bit of a tougher matchup for him tonight against the Grizzlies, even with a doubtful Jaren Jackson Jr. You got to watch out for that Jay Huff. Jay Huff closing the game the other night after Zach Edey fouled out. Weisberg said, no best ball this AM? Shocked. I miss draft season already, man. I miss it. I've had like this reflex to go and click on my drafts tab on Underdog and not to be. You can get some daily drafts in there over on Underdog, right? You haven't signed up at Underdog. Promo code FTN will get you a deposit match bonus up to $1,000. And before I go, want to finish up in the chat here. Kroger's also bringing up Brunson against the Pacers against Halliburton, right? Brunson is, I think, somebody that I like a little bit more on DraftKings. Still 88 on FanDuel, which is pretty fantastic, but a similar price over here on DraftKings, 8,600 against the Pacers. I think for me right now, Krugers, it's Towns on FanDuel. If I'm picking just one of those spend up Knicks, Towns on FanDuel, give me Brunson on DraftKings. But it's close. I would expect if I ran an MME build on FanDuel, I would certainly have shares of both there as well. And yeah, bringing up the WWE beef, right? Those guys legitimately were out there at the wrestling event, and we're in the Garden tonight. So yeah, that's going to be one. I think that's a game that's going to be on the screen. Maybe we take the quad box off and just watch that game solo. Weisberg says, so tailed Bane under 3.5. 3-pointers made Cam Thomas, or 3-pointers made in Cam Thomas under 25.5. So for me, Weisberg, on underdog, we were looking at a couple first quarter props. Maxey over 7.5 first quarter points is one we liked again. And then last night I had some entries with McCall Bridges over 4.5 first quarter points, but they've taken that down. I think that is now 0.94x. And you can actually, I think it was like 1.1x for over 1.5 Bridges first quarter rebounds. So that's the one we actually took here on the stream. Hit your 2 parlays last night, so feeling a bit ready. Yeah, man, we had 2 3v3s from the stream yesterday, so we were feeling good coming into this morning. And again, I mentioned Giddy so many times on the stream. I like the Giddy PRA overs at 25.5 here today. The minutes is what I really wanted to see. I would have loved to see the overs hit on Wednesday too, but still got 30 minutes in that one and no Lonzo tonight, so I'm back on Josh Giddey. And Kroger's asking, this can be our last question of the stream before we shut it down. And of course, we'll be breaking down the stream even further as news comes out throughout the day, as we get ownership in the FTN Fantasy Discord. But Kroger's asking, Şengün night again. Again, it's a tougher matchup, even without Jaren Jackson Jr. I think he's fairly priced, but he's not a player that I'm prioritizing at the center position on either site, right? Talked about the 2 guys that I really love on FanDuel. Only an $800 discount down to Towns there on DraftKings, but again, Drummond also $6,800 on DK. So more of a debate there, I think, for me on DK with Şengün, but certainly not going to scoff at any sort of Şengün ownership that I would see in an MME build or a single lineup. The guy's a fantasy monster. All right, everybody, that is going to do it for me today here on the Daily Dime. We got some pick 6 in there, underdog prize picks, some DFS talk. Again, for our FTN Fantasy subscribers, I will see you guys throughout the afternoon in the Discord and leading up to lock. And we're back here on Monday, same time, same place. Week 2 of the NBA season, week 2 of the FTN Fantasy Daily Dime. Appreciate you all tuning in, sticking with me, whether you caught it live or on the replay. See you guys on Monday. Enjoy your weekend. Goodbye.